Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our February webinar, where we are talking about helping our aging parents and finding balance in that process as much as we can. It's interesting. Last month, we talked about helping our adult children. And so clearly we're focusing a little bit on that kind of sandwich generation. When I wrote my book, Empty Nest, Full Pockets, it was kind of, early in that phase of life where the kids are leaving, getting ready to become an empty nester or am one recently, and dealing with the kind of the emotional weight of that. And then as the kids get older, the challenges change. They become, of course, even more independent. They become adults and are living their own life. And then as an aside, when this is going on, all of a sudden we have, in some cases, what can be some additional emotional weight. And that's what's going on with our mom and dad. So I found when I was researching this, I always try to listen to some podcasts and read some books and learn more about the thing because I'm not an aging expert by any means. I'm a financial advisor, but wanted to just learn the landscape a little bit, the questions that are being asked and some of the experts and how they're answering those. And, I did find this topic to be quite a bit more sensitive than with adult children. I don't know if it's because we feel like our kids have a long runway so they can make some mistakes and hopefully not drag us down with them too much. But, with mom and dad, they've cared for us. They've been a source of strength and support for us most of our lives. Many on this call maybe have had, the fortunate to have both parents at home. Maybe you just had one. Maybe you were raised by grandparents. Whoever filled that role in your life, they've done so much for us. And now we get to a stage in life where maybe they don't need a ton of help from us, but they need a little bit of help. And then as their life story begins to progress, maybe they need a lot of help from us. And, it's clear that we're not just making financial decisions by any means. We're dealing with, in some cases, a role reversal, a little bit of guilt versus obligation. We are sometimes afraid to say no. We've got a lot of things like sibling dynamics at work. In a lot of cases, what I found is that a lot of families wait until something breaks, until there's a big health scare or a really large money issue. Cybersecurity and scams for elders are just all over the place. They're such a target of that audience, which is disgusting to me. It makes me absolutely crazy, but it is what it is. And finding ways to protect our parents from all of those scams and the people that would take advantage of them. And, as our parents, we feel very eager to throw elbows and do what we can to protect them. And when we see them being taken advantage of. So again, sometimes we wait until something like that breaks. So we have something like that happen to where we start to really get involved. But what we find is that helping parents is not really a single decision. It's a series of decisions over time. And the risk isn't in helping by any means. And again, I want to bring a lot of sensitivity to this topic because I know everybody out there is dealing with a different set of issues and a different severity of issues. But the risk isn't, again, in helping. It's helping without a plan. And so my name is Matt Moline. I'm a financial planner, certified financial planner. I'm the founder and CEO of Prairie Fire Wealth Planning in Des Moines, Iowa, where I just learned this morning from my team that we are expecting a snowstorm tonight. So I'm very bad at paying attention to the weather until it's in my face. So anyway, those of you that are in central Iowa, it sounds like we're going to have a little bit more of winter after a beautiful stretch here where I thought maybe spring was here. My nose certainly did with all the sneezing and allergic reaction to spring coming early. But again, we've helped a number of families over the years, hundreds of families over the years that they've navigated the empty nest generation, the sandwich generation, transitioning from becoming a full-time parent to an empty nester, to being a full-time worker and moving into retirement. And then in the midst of that, dealing with all of these familial issues of our adult children and now perhaps our aging parents. And the big concern with this is really just helping reactively. And in a lot of cases, some of these reactive moves can be things like writing a check without fully understanding the full picture. So we want to jump in and help. We do the same thing with our kids. Maybe we're co-signing loans or leases that we don't understand. Maybe we're paying for care without knowing the longer-term costs of doing that. Maybe we try to do like a fix-it plan where we're helping our parents temporarily, and we don't really have a plan on the backside of that. Many of us assume that Medicare is just going to cover it. And in many cases, when it comes to long-term care or caring for our parents, it doesn't. And whether it's supplements or an actual long-term care need, we have gaps in insurance that we might have to step in and help. And so the goal here is really to reframe the issue as much as we can and to help intentionally where we can help. And then we use the framework at Prairie Fire, a lot of guardrails, so that we understand inside of our plan our income plan, our lifestyle and cash flow plans, what can be worked out on the high side, what can be worked out on the low side, and how to build in some of these caveats, some of these what ifs that might happen along the way. And by doing that, when that what if happens, we've already planned for it. We've got a goal then to help intentionally, like I said. I'm going to put a file out here that's called, I call it the Helping Mom and Dad Checklist, but it's basically, what issues I should consider for my aging parents. And it's a gift to all of us for being a part of our webinar today, but you can download that and we can always get you a copy if for some reason you're not able to get a hold of it. But it does go through a litany of these issues we're going to talk about today. And it gives you some yes, no things like, do the titles of my parents' accounts or investments or bank accounts need to be reviewed or updated? Power of attorney, insurance issues, estate issues, cash flow, living arrangement. A lot of the things that we're going to touch on lightly here today, there's more detail in this checklist. So I'm going to leave that available for the whole webinar, and you can pull that down at any time. And I hope that you'll find it helpful. All right. So we're talking about today caring for our aging parents without sacrificing our future. And so where we want to talk about a little bit, and we already have, is why this is so hard. This is a core issue that all of us deal with. In many cases, it's a progressive issue that starts slowly and then begins to take on a life of its own and snowballs. And it's not just money that we're using to care for our parents. In many cases, it's our time and a lot of our different resources. And so I'm hoping to give you some strategies today and just some categories that you really need to be thinking through if you are either addressing this issue or perhaps that it's coming down the road. So the areas I want to focus on are family dynamics, of course, money. Wouldn't be a financial planner presentation if we didn't touch on some money tips there, healthcare, housing, and then some of the legal things around power of attorneys and perhaps what we need to do with estates and trusts, those kind of things. This is going to be a high-level conversation. We do have access to Q&A in here, and I'll pop that up to take a look at here at the end. So if you do have questions, please punch them in along the way, and I'll do what I can to address most of those there at the end. So, all right, let's get rolling. Let's talk a little bit about healthcare is where we want to start in healthcare planning. So what we want to really look at is what our parents' current health status is versus kind of their likely next phase of what that's going to look like and who's going to coordinate that care. So what's going to happen perhaps if there's after a fall or a hospitalization or a cognitive decline event. And what we're talking about here is there's a difference between medical care, custodial care, and long-term care. So medical care is treating illness, something that happens in the near term. Custodial care is more who's going to take care of things on a day-to-day basis. Perhaps mom and dad can't get up the stairs anymore. Perhaps they need someone to come in and help day-to-day with some of the activities that they need to live, like bathing and things like that. And then long-term care, of course, is when that daily help is needed for a little bit longer decision. And so these healthcare issues can be some of the most difficult things to breach. And in many cases, they're not always happening quickly. They're happening slowly over time. So one of the things that I talked about, is I'm a financial advisor and work with a lot of families, but we have dealt with a lot of these issues in our family. My wife and I have 4 adult children, and they're all in their mid to late 20s, mostly late 20s now. If they're listening to this, they may not like to hear that, but it's true. They're getting closer to 30 every day. I can't have a presentation without mentioning that I have a granddaughter, our grandchild on the way here in April. And to say I'm excited that doesn't even encapsulate it. So it's just something, as all of you know out there, if you've got grandkids, how exciting that period is. But that's coming up. I found a really good book called Crack the Code. I'll hold that up here for you to see. And so it's by Tracy Bild, B-I-L-D. And again, it's called Crack the Code, Finding Answers and Strength in Caring for Aging Parents. And so in this, she's really a real estate expert. It talks a lot about, long-term care, custodial care, and how that works and where to find the right facilities for your family. And we'll talk next about housing. But in the book, she talks a lot about conversation starters. And I found that really helpful. This is from page 25. And it just says, let your parent know that this conversation comes from a place of love, not fear or pressure. Make it clear that you want to honor their wishes and ensure they're cared for in the best possible way. And frame the conversation about being about them, their preferences, their values, their desires. And so have you thought about what kind of care you want if you weren't able to live at home anymore? Who would you trust to make decisions if you weren't able to? What medical treatments would you want or not want in the future? And so all of those kind of things I found really helpful, because I think about it in terms of if my kids came to me. So they came to me and said, and we can talk about this a little bit more in the money section, but Dad, how much money do you make and where does it come from? So if they came to me and said that, I'd say, none of your damn business, Sporto. I'm taking care of my financial decisions and I don't need your help. Well, it's no different for our parents when we come to them, no matter how old we are or how old they are. Some pushback. I've got this covered. I don't need your help in this area. We've got things covered. And so being patient with these decisions and these conversations and having a lot of empathy is even more important than I think it is with our kids, because they've cared for us and now these roles are being reversed, and that's tough for everybody. All right, next thing to talk about is housing. So do we stay in the house? Do we downsize? Do we look at assisted living? A lot of people prefer and work on aging in place. How can they put an aging in place plan in place? Excuse me. And so when they do this, in a lot of cases, what we found is that they underestimate those costs. So they think that aging in place is going to be by far the cheapest option. So that will make the most sense. But in reality, it's often underestimated. So let's think about our mom is 82. She wants to stay in her home. And so at first glance, the house is paid off. The Medicare is covering medical care. We have kids living nearby. So the assumption is that this should be manageable. And so what I wanted to point out a little bit is some of the hidden costs that come with this option. So there's going to be modifications of the home, make it more user-friendly. So bathroom grab bars, walk-in or a roll-in shower, ramps or stair lifts. The grandkids, of course, will love the stair lift because they get to ride up and down the stairs, but it's not there for their amusement, guys. It's there to help mom and dad. Wider doorways can be often out of pocket, not covered by Medicare, and those can run from $5,000 to $25,000. Starting maybe with some in-home health care, then all of a sudden, that's a few hours a week. That may grow then to daily care. Eventually that becomes multiple hours a day. So what we're looking at is costs that could easily run up to $2,000 plus a month just by staying in home. So in a lot of cases, there's a lot of then invisible support costs too that's going on with the family. So perhaps if you're part of the caregiving team, you're missing a lot of work. You're maybe having to get paid help for transportation, for meal preparation, for medication reminders, all of those kind of things. And there's always emergency coverage. If a caregiver calls in sick, things like that. So there's other things like medical alert systems. And if they're still owning their home, you've got property taxes, insurance, utilities, repairs and maintenance, all of that stuff. So I just say all this to recognize that aging in place doesn't always mean aging without a cost. It just kind of spreads that cost out quietly. So we want to be careful here. I'm not saying this isn't a good thing to be thinking about. It can be a great transitional plan. But you have to have some of those costs in mind when you're doing that, to understand that it isn't just a free option that Medicare is going to kick in and cover it. Definitely not the case. Okay, so like I said earlier, if my son came to me and said, Dad, I want to know all of your income sources. I want to know how you pay for your home maintenance. I want to know where all your insurance and legal documents are, all that stuff. I'm sure he can imagine the conversation just as well as I can. And when I approached my parents about this, they've been great. They've been awesome about, we want your help, Matt. You're a financial advisor. You know as much as anyone, hopefully a little bit more, and can help us with this. But for those of you that are not financial experts and you're going to mom and dad to say, I'd really like to help with some of these things. Can we talk about it? This is an area that you've got to be patient, because we've got to think about the generational differences between our generation and theirs. Many were raised by parents that were in the Depression era. I think about my grandparents, and no one talked about this stuff. And even now, they're children of that generation, and they don't talk about it either if they can help it. And so some of the things that we need to learn about when we can are definitely our parents' income sources. Are they gathering Social Security, pensions? Where do they have investments? There's a lot of expenses that maybe we forget about, like home maintenance or care gaps, or transportation. So what we always encourage you to think about is to say we don't need every detail, but we just need enough to help kind of avoid some of these blind spots and where these things might be taking place. So when we're walking a family through, they're like, I want to help my father or my mother more. We're always encouraging just to kind of look around the house when you're allowed and when it's okay with your parents for statements, because many of our elders still rely on paper. And in many cases, that can be a good thing. So our children never get a statement in the mail. They get everything online. Many of us in the sandwich generation do a little bit of both. We want the annoying stuff not to come in, but we like to see our tax forms in paper and take those to the CPA. Our parents, very much paper-based. And so in many cases, you will find a lot of paper around their house if you can learn where they keep it, and can learn a lot about their financial situation. And so this can be a conversation of, do you mind if I just look around? I'm not looking to find anything untoward. All I want to do is learn a little bit more so I can see if I can help. And then what you're looking for are maybe some unexpected fees on those statements. Maybe you're looking at cash withdrawals that maybe even your parents don't know about or remember. Some sort of strange titling on the accounts where somebody's on that account that maybe doesn't belong to your family or anyone that you know. So here we're looking for elder abuse. We're looking for things where maybe a practitioner somewhere is taking advantage of our parents. But we're also learning them, where is the money coming from? Do they have enough to live on? Are they going into debt? Is everything going on okay with their house as far as the house deed? I've read a lot about these house scams where people are using title fraud, where they're getting access to the titles and taking out second mortgages on people's houses without them even knowing it. So checking that the home ownership records and that everything is in place there like it's supposed to be. Once again, being patient with this, knowing that we don't have to know every detail, but you want to be looking to see for anything that just doesn't smell right. And those are a great way we can help our parents, because we can learn from things that maybe they don't even know are going on out there. And when it comes to fraud, when it comes to scams, all of the things that we all know can take place on a daily basis against our parents. And I just see this as a way that we can really protect them, to ask the questions. Can I get involved? Can I see where everything is? Do you mind if I just take a quick look? I talked to a good friend the other day. They had their parents had a problem with their account. Do you mind if I take a look? I just want to make sure this doesn't happen to you, Mom. So whatever that can, however you can handle that in your family best, these are the areas where we can step in and really be of assistance to our family. But on the legal side, I want to talk just a little bit about the difference between powers of attorney and healthcare directives, because I think in a lot of cases we think, well, we've got a power of attorney, that's all we need, or we've got a healthcare directive and that will allow us to take care of their financial affairs. And it's just not the case. These are two different places. These are two different areas of care that both need to be covered and we both need to really understand. So I would say even more so than where all the accounts are and where the money's coming from, these two, understanding where these two are and how they work and getting the right people in line to help when the time is right, is one of the most proactive steps that we can help to help our parents and to get them ready for this stage of life. So power of attorney is a legal document that allows somebody else, an agent, to make financial and legal decisions on someone's behalf. It can cover paying bills, managing bank and investment accounts, signing tax returns, handling real estate, dealing with insurance and benefits, and it works while the person is alive. And so if mom and dad need our help while they're still alive, we can step in, write checks for them, help pay bills, take a look at investment statements, make sure no excessive transactions are taking place. It's often effective immediately, depending on how it's written, and it usually stops working at death. So let's have an example. Let's say dad has an early cognitive decline, and he can't keep track of his bills or his insurance paperwork. So with a power of attorney, his daughter could pay his bills. She could speak to the banks and the insurance companies about what's going on. She could manage the accounts without guessing or sneaking around. So basically, a power of attorney lets someone manage money and legal affairs. So a big distinction there. The healthcare directive or the healthcare proxy or living will, these are all names that you'll hear for this, is a legal document that names someone to make medical decisions if they can't. And it will often spell out some things like end of life wishes and how someone wants those taken care of. So it will cover medical treatment decisions, life support preferences, things like end of life care, who doctors can talk to. And this works only when the person cannot speak for themselves. And it does not give any financial authority, just as a reminder. So let's say mom has a stroke and she can't communicate. With the healthcare directive, her son would be able to speak with the doctors, help them make treatment decisions, and really this is an important one, ensure that the care aligns with her wishes, the way that she wanted this taken care of. So I've given you a side-by-side comparison here. You can kind of see on the frame how that all works. And so you can see it does cover medical care, but not when it's a financial power of attorney. The healthcare directive does that. And they both end family dynamics. There's nothing that I deal with more when it comes to settling estates or dealing with aging parents when it comes to my clients than I'll call it the unequal sibling yoke, where we've got a number of siblings, maybe just one or two, maybe you're an only child. But the unequal sibling problem is, I swear to heaven, one of the most common things that I see in practice. And when I'm talking to families of, I've got this brother that doesn't help, I've got this sister, she does everything, we have no idea what's going on, we have a crazy person who's taking all of the money. Man, this stuff happens all the time. It really is. And so I get it. I get understanding those boundaries. Just like anything, if we can develop a plan early on, it's helpful. But I'll be honest with you, some of this stuff just has to be managed as best as possible within the legal frameworks that we have and all that we can. Let's say, though, that we do have it's an unequal sibling issue just because maybe of geography. And so there's a lot of solutions for that, where I'm going to help mom and dad with this, but maybe you can help with that. So I'm here. I'll help make sure the snow gets cleared out, the yard's taken care of. I'll check in on them all the time. And then maybe sibling that lives away can handle paying all the bills, making sure the financial affairs are being taken care of, reviewing statements. And so what we're doing is a divide and conquer approach to this a little bit, where we're trying to help out as much as we can. And those of us that are closer can do one thing, and those of us that are away. I listened to a couple podcasts. There's one called like the Aging Parent Playbook. And she's a physician, and she talked about this quite a bit, where I can't do this part any longer. I can't take mom or dad to the doctor all the time, and I'm going to need help with that. So you can, if you're not here, you can help pay for it, but I can't keep doing it all this way. And developing those boundaries early on in the process is something she's a proponent for. And she has a whole program and class. I didn't take it. I listened to a couple of her podcasts. Very, very strong opinions. So if you want an opinionated view, the Aging Parent Playbook, I believe is what it was called, as the podcast. Again, I'd mention as a resource. And then we're also talking about, financial help versus emotional labor. So we're not trying to, like I talked about in the kids, adult children podcast, we don't want to have a lot of leverage that we'll do this, but we expect X back. Say we'll do this, or I'll put you on a path to where you can find the resources to help. But in many cases, maybe we can't do the full financial help that they need. I think these boundaries help protect our relationship. And we also want to be thinking about, through all of this, and I talked about it in the title, our retirement, our future is what I'll call a non-renewable asset. We're going to retire once. I've been fortunate to take hundreds of families through retirement and see all the different ways that it can take place, and the joy, the sorrow, some of the anxiety that it can bring, but in many cases over time, definitely joy. But it's a non-renewable asset. If you do it, it's got to last, and the ability for you to go back to work and save that, that may not be an option for us down the road. So overextending ourselves to help our parents, we can't do that in a way that doesn't allow us to have a future. We have to still protect our future. And I think having a plan, having some guardrails that we can do X, Y, and Z, but not this, is one of the best ways to handle that. And so in many cases, where the help comes from might matter more than how much the help. So I can do this one time, but I can't do an ongoing commitment, for instance. So yes, I can help. Let's figure out housing in this way. I'll help you get settled. I'll help make the deposit. And then we're going to have to look to other resources. Maybe we have to explore Medicaid and some of those kind of things of how that's going to work. But I think setting that kind of guardrail that we can help one time versus an ongoing commitment is a big thing. We also talked about with our adult children, having an end in mind. Tapping retirement accounts is often one of the most expensive options when it comes to helping. You'll all probably know this, but the reason is taxes. And the way those taxes work with retirement accounts is very different than other money, cash money maybe that you've got set aside. Being careful with this and understanding that by pulling these retirement accounts out, you're not just pulling back and paying taxes on that money, it's disappearing from your retirement plan. And if you're not working any longer, the ability to get it back in is going to be very, very difficult. Understanding why tapping those might be the last thing that you want to do. So if you're looking at this as a situation where you want to help mom and dad, it is good to have a plan, and it is good to understand the tax ramifications of each bucket of money so that you're helping from the most places, also going to protect your future. And helping doesn't always have to mean writing a check. So in many cases, saying yes without a plan is often more damaging than saying no with compassion. We can offer time, we can offer emotional assistance, we can help develop a friend network. We can get them involved in church, lots of things that we can do to help them develop community. And so what we're doing is basically saying yes with a plan. In some cases, just writing a check and making a problem go away, just like it is with our adult children, isn't always our best solution. So, all right. So I did mention the checklist that's been available to all of you while we've been talking here. I'm going to run over to the chat and see if we've got any questions in there. I did get a few early on when I was starting the research for this project, and a lot is, how do I begin the conversation? So again, I wanted to go back to what Tracy said in her book. And she said, like, Mom, I've been thinking about the future, and I'd like to talk about how we can make sure you're taken care of in the way that you want. Can we find a time to discuss this? So then what you're doing is not walking in, throwing an elbow and saying, hey, where is everything? Let me help. We're being very specific that we want to help. We want to be part of the process as best that we can. And we're asking for to at least start having the conversation. And so I think that can be a great way to help mom and dad. And in many cases, I've made this mistake in asking my parents about things. It's just like, where is this? And, being very frank about it instead of, a little bit more understanding of their situation, that it is hard to open up. It is hard to ask for help. I think all of us have that challenge. And so when it comes to having help with our healthcare, with our money, you can't get more difficult issues than that. So being patient, can we find a time to discuss this? I thought was really good advice and something that we're trying to employ. So I would love to hear all of your stories. We gather stories here at Prairie Fire, and we try to share those as best we can to help our community out as they're going through these issues. Again, I'm not a healthcare expert. I'm not an aging expert. I'm a financial advisor that helps families through all the different financial transitions they go through. And this is one of them. This is one of those out there that, we can look at the nuts and bolts and the dollars and cents, but this goes way beyond that. Helping our mom and dad who have done so much for us over the years is super emotional, and to say and expect anything less would be foolhardy in my mind. So let me get over here. Thank you again for joining us today. You can always find us at our website, which is pfwplanning.com. I appreciate you taking the time to both register and be a part of this. Again, any feedback that you have, stories that you'd like to share, we'd love to interview on our podcast and hear more, because this is something that a lot of people are dealing with, and any resource, any experience that all of you have had can be very helpful. There are a couple episodes on my podcast, Empty Nest Full Pockets, that we did talk about this, and I interviewed a couple people. One was an aging expert, and she talked about a lot about the real estate components of this and how to deal with that. Another, Becky, shared her story about her mom and dad and the challenges that she went through in caring for them with a lot of siblings. So if you're interested in something like that, if you check into our podcast and episodes, you'll be able to find those pretty easily. We also post that stuff to our YouTube channel, which you can find under Prairie Fire Wealth in YouTube. And this replay will go up there as well. So thank you again all for being with us today. I appreciate your support and being part of our community. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody next month. I believe we're going to be talking about taxes, everybody's favorite topic. And we'll be bringing that in as kind of an empty nester, things to be thinking about. Big changes from Secure 2.0 on things like the standard deduction. So we want to touch on that, how it might be impacting everybody, especially if you're a giver, charitable giver, and how those things have changed a little bit. So please stay tuned. You'll see all that posting on both our website and our social media. So have a great week. Thank you.